What do you do when you cannot stop returning to the place where someone died? 25 centuries ago, in the kingdom of Caroline, there was a woman who walked the same path at dawn for years. Her name was Ubbirī. She was a wife of King Paramatthadīpanī. Her daughter Henad, whose name was Jīvā, life, had died young. This story is preserved in the Therigatha, the verses of the elder nuns. In the 5th poem of the 3rd chapter, 6 short stanzas Ubbirī composed, with a commentary by Dhammapāla on those same verses. It is one of the strangest answers in the canon to a grief that does not stop, because the answer Ubbirī was given did not lessen what she had lost. It made it the size of the ground. To understand the answer, you have to understand the years. Ubbirī had grown up in Sāvatthī and was chosen, when she was young, to enter the household of King Paramatthadīpanī of Kosala, a man who kept counsel with the wise and who came each season to the grove outside the city to listen to the teacher staying there. In the palace, she had her own quarters, the cool inner courtyards where the heat of the day did not reach, a small garden behind the wall where she liked to sit in the evening. After some years, she had a daughter. The girl was called Jīvā. The name means life. She was raised in the cool inner rooms. She learned the songs the women of the household sang. She walked in the garden behind the wall. By every account that has come down, she was a quiet and gentle child, small for her age, watchful, slow to laugh and slow to cry. She was perhaps 3 years old, perhaps 4. The canon does not say. One morning, she did not wake. Ubbirī was the one who came to wake her. She knelt by the small bed. She put her hand on the child's cheek. The cheek was cool. The cremation ground at Sāvatthī stood at the bend of the Aciravatī, where the river turned south toward the sea. It was a place at the edge of the city, a grove of stunted trees, open ground between them. The smell of ash on the wind from the funerary fires that had been there before, and the fires that would come after. It was the place the dead were laid. The household took the small body of Jīvā there in the cool of the second morning. The wrappings were the white cloth of the household. The bier was small. They laid her at the bend of the river in a place under one of the trees. They built the fire. They did what was done. Ubbirī stood at the place. She did not weep then. The weeping came later. When the fire was finished, the household took up what was left and laid it in the small bowl shape that had been prepared in the ground. They closed the ground over her. The next morning before dawn, Ubbirī rose. She put on a plain cloth. She left the palace by the side gate. She walked through the still streets of Sāvatthī. She left through the western gate. She walked along the river path until she came to the bend, and to the grove, and to the place where her daughter lay. She stood there. She wept. She called the daughter's name, Jīvā, my daughter. She walked back to the palace before the city woke. The next morning she did the same thing. The morning after that, she did the same thing. Her husband, the king, came with her at first. Then he stopped coming. The household servants came with her. Then they stopped coming. The road from the western gate to the bend of the river became, in time, a path through the brush. And in more time, it became a path that ran because of her feet alone. In summer she came. In the rain she came. In the cool months she came. In summer the grove was hot, and the dust on the path was warm, and the leaves of the trees were heavy and full. She stood at the same place. She wept. She called, Jīvā, my daughter. In the rain she came. The path was mud. The river was swollen. The grove was very green. She stood at the same place. She wept. She called, Jīvā, my daughter. In the cool months she came. The leaves of the grove were on the ground. The branches were bare. Her breath in the dawn cold was visible at her mouth. She stood at the same place. She wept. She called, Jīvā, my daughter. Years passed in this way. Her hair, which had been the dark hair of a young woman, began to be threaded with gray. Her face was no longer the face she had brought into the household. She kept walking the path. She had forgotten by then what it was to be a person who did not walk this path. Jīvā, my daughter. One morning, and perhaps in the 8th year of her walking, perhaps in the 10th, the canon does not say, the teacher who was staying in the grove outside the city went out to walk along the river. He had taken the alms round in Sāvatthī. He had returned to the grove. The morning was clear. There was no urgency in his pace. He walked the river path. His attendant walked beside him. They came to a place along the path where the path bent, and where, through the trees on the right, the bend of the Aciravatī was visible, and beyond it, the open ground of the cremation grove. There was a sound coming from the grove, a woman's voice calling a name. The Buddha turned aside. He stepped off the river path. He walked toward the grove. Ubbirī was at the place where her daughter lay. She was kneeling in the grass beside the small mound. The dawn light was on her shoulders. The voice that had been calling for years was still calling. Jīvā, my daughter. She did not hear the footsteps. When she looked up, there was a man standing at the edge of the grove, a monk in saffron robe, the morning light on the cloth of his shoulders, his attendant a few paces behind him. She had not seen him approach. He did not come closer. He stood where he was and he said, Mother, why do you weep? The voice was not loud. It was not raised. It was only a question, asked across the open ground, by a man who had stopped on his way somewhere else and had turned aside. Ubbirī did not answer at first. The question that anyone was asking it was new to her. Her husband had stopped asking. The household had stopped asking. She had been weeping for a long time alone, and no one in the city had asked her in a long time why. She gestured to the small mound at her knees. She said, I weep for my daughter. The Buddha did not move. He looked at the small mound, and then he looked slowly at the rest of the cremation ground around it, the other small mounds, the other places, the whole open ground between the trees, all the way to the river. And he said, in this ground 84,000 daughters of that name lie buried. For which Jīvā do you weep? Ubbirī did not move. The words crossed the open ground and reached her where she knelt, and they did not pass through her. They stopped where she was. For which Jīvā do you weep? The number was a number she had never heard. 84,000 was the canonical number, the number that meant more than you could count. In a city the size of Sāvatthī, in a country the size of Caroline, in a span of years longer than any person could remember, 84,000 daughters by the name Jīvā had been laid in this ground. One Jīvā had been 3 years old. One Jīvā had been a woman of 80 who had been called the name as a child by parents long since gone. One Jīvā had died in the cool months. The cremation fire had been built against the cold of the morning. One Jīvā had died in the rains. The fire had hissed against the wet wood. One Jīvā had died in the same week as Ubbirī's own daughter in a different household at the other end of the city. And her mother had walked to this same ground for a year and had stopped walking and had been buried in the same ground when her own time came. One Jīvā, one Jīvā, one Jīvā, 84,000 of them. Ubbirī looked at the ground in front of her, the small mound her own hands had closed. She looked then at the next mound over. She looked at the next. She looked slowly at the whole open ground between the trees. The grief did not go away. It did not lessen. It did not vanish. The grief in her did not become smaller because she had been shown that it was not unique. What changed was its shape. It had been the size of one small mound. Now it was the size of the ground. It was the size of every name that had ever been called over the ground. She knelt on the open earth in the dawn light, and the grief in her was as wide as the grove, and the grove was very wide. Something in her, the part that had been counting, set the counting down. The Buddha did not speak again. He stood where he was for a moment longer. Then he turned. He walked back to the river path. She did not see him go. She stayed. The verses Ubbirī later composed are preserved in the Therigatha as 6 short stanzas under her name. The translation that follows is from the public domain English of Caroline Rhys Davids, set down in 1909, lightly adapted for the ear. She begins at the place, In the grove I called for my daughter. Jīvā, Jīvā. I called as a mother calls. She names what she was shown. 84,000 daughters by that name lie buried in this ground. For which of them, mother, do you weep? She names what shifted. The dart that was in my heart, driven deep and never to be drawn out.